Christmas Eve used to mean laughter, carols, and my daughter asking for my recipe. This year, I stood in her kitchen, holding the pie I'd baked since she was 5. When I reached for a plate, she said, "Mom, you didn't contribute. Guests don't eat first." Her words cut cleaner than any knife on that table. I smiled. The kind of smile you wear when you realize what's broken can't be fixed. Later, when the house went quiet and the lights dimmed, I reminded her, gently, exactly who paid for the table she just served pride on. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. I always love knowing. My name is Margaret. I'm 68 years old, and I've spent the last 43 years believing that love was something you showed through your hands. Not words, hands. My daughter, Catherine, she's 36 now. Sometimes I look at her and I still see the 7-year-old standing on a stepladder in my kitchen, flour in her dark hair, asking why we added butter to the dough. I told her it was to make it gold. She believed me then. She believed most things I told her then. I was a different woman back then, too. We both were. My husband died when Catherine was 19, 23 years ago now. Time does something strange to grief. It doesn't disappear. It just gets quieter, like a radio playing in another room. You stop hearing it if you're busy enough. And I stayed busy. For Catherine. For the house. For the life I promised my husband I'd hold together. After he passed, I worked at a law office downtown. Nothing glamorous. I was a paralegal. File management, scheduling, the kind of work that keeps things orderly. I was good at it. I saved every raise. Every bonus went into Catherine's college fund, then her first apartment, then her wedding. When my husband left, the house came to me, fully paid, which was a small miracle I never took for granted. Catherine married young. Too young looking back. She was 23. Her husband, David, was a sales manager, handsome in that forgettable way men sometimes are. Tall, good at smiling, not good at much else as it turned out. They bought a house 3 blocks from mine, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch. Catherine decorated it like it was a magazine spread. I remember walking through that house for the first time after they moved in, and she grabbed my hand. She still did that then, held my hand, and said, "Mom, do you think it's perfect?" I told her it was. What I didn't say was that perfection is fragile. It breaks easy. David left when Catherine was 31. There was another woman, the predictable kind of story that makes you feel tired instead of angry. Catherine was devastated in the quiet way people are when they've invested everything into a person, and that person decides you're not enough. She didn't cry much. That worried me more than if she had. She sold the house at a loss. That's when I stepped in. I'd been working at the law firm for 40 years by then. I had savings, real savings, not just comfortable, substantial, the kind of money that meant something. My boss offered me early retirement with a generous package. I was going to take it eventually anyway, and I thought, why not now? Why not use this time with Catherine while we still have it? I put a down payment on a beautiful Victorian in the Oak Hills neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a kitchen with a gas range and marble counters. I put it in both our names, mine as the primary, Catherine as co-owner. I wanted her to have security, to know that she was safe, that she'd never have to depend on a man or anyone for a roof over her head. She cried when I showed her, real tears. She held me and said, "Mom, I don't know how to thank you." I told her the same thing I'd been telling her since she was 7. You don't have to thank me, that's what mothers do. What I should have said was, don't forget this. Don't forget what love looks like when it doesn't ask for anything back. But I didn't. I just stood there in the empty living room, my arm around my daughter, and I believed we were going to be fine. I believed love was enough. For a while it was. Catherine got a job as a graphic designer. She was talented at it, detail-oriented, creative in a way I never was. She made good money. Not quite enough to maintain a house like that on her own, but we managed. I paid the property taxes and the insurance. She paid the utilities and groceries. It was a partnership. It felt like a partnership. She dated occasionally. Nothing serious. I was grateful for that, actually. I didn't want to see her hurt again. And somehow, as long as she stayed single, as long as it was just us in that house, I could pretend that we were enough for each other, that her life didn't need to include anyone else to be complete. I see now how selfish that was. Catherine met Marcus 5 years ago. He was a contractor, solid, quiet, the kind of man who fixes things instead of breaking them. He had a steady job, his own business, a house that he'd bought and renovated himself. When Catherine brought him to Sunday dinner, I knew immediately that this was different. The way she looked at him, the way she unconsciously leaned toward him when he spoke. He was going to take her away from me, not literally, but he was going to shift the weight of her attention, and I wasn't ready for that. I was pleasant to Marcus. I cooked his favorite foods. I asked about his business. But there was a distance I maintained, a cool professionalism, the same tone I used at work. Catherine noticed. She didn't say anything, but I could feel her noticing. They got engaged 3 years ago. I threw them an engagement party. I decorated the house with flowers and lights. I made food for 50 people. Everyone said it was beautiful. But when Catherine hugged me that night, I held her a little too tight, and she gently pulled away. The wedding was last June. A small ceremony, just family and close friends. Catherine looked beautiful, radiant. I watched her walk down the aisle, and instead of feeling joy, I felt something crumble inside me. A landmark had passed. The last of her childhood was gone. She belonged to someone else now. She belongs to someone else now, I thought. Not just belongs. She'd chosen to. I told myself I was happy for her. I told myself this was what I'd raised her for, to have a full life, to love and be loved. But the truth, the honest truth that I barely admitted to myself, was that I felt abandoned after everything I'd done, after everything I'd sacrificed. She moved into Marcus's house a week before the wedding. Marcus sold his place and they planned to renovate the Victorian, our Victorian, to make it their own. They wanted me to stay with them, they said. There was plenty of space. They needed my guidance on the renovations. I refused to sell them the house. We never made it official, but the agreement became clear. I would live there. They would visit on weekends, maybe holidays. But it was my house, my space, the last thing I had that was entirely mine. Catherine was confused by this. I could see the hurt in her eyes. But she didn't push. She never pushed with me. That was always her way, to absorb disappointment and move on. Marcus, though. I saw him look at Catherine when I made the decision, and I saw him understand what was happening. I saw him recognize that I was a problem he'd have to manage. That should have been my first warning. The rift started small, innocent even. Catherine and Marcus would come over for Sunday dinners, and the conversations would be different. They had couple things, inside jokes, shared experiences, plans I wasn't part of. Marcus would touch Catherine's shoulder while she talked. He'd look at her with this expression of ownership, like he was marking his territory. I hated it. I hated him, I think. Though I told myself it was something more reasonable. I told myself I was concerned about Catherine, that I was protecting her investment, our investment in the house, that I was simply a mother who wanted the best for her daughter. But the truth was simpler than that. I was jealous. I was a woman in my 60s watching her only child fall in love with someone who didn't need her and who didn't want me in the house I'd built. And I didn't know how to live with that. So I started paying attention to everything Marcus did wrong. He didn't appreciate Catherine's cooking. I'd see him push food around his plate. He spent too much time on his phone. He made decisions without consulting her. Big decisions about the kitchen renovation, about colors and materials. He was condescending in small ways. When Catherine mentioned something she'd read, Marcus would offer a correction that made her expression go blank. The more I looked, the more I saw, or the more I convinced myself I saw. Catherine started to seem tired. That's what I noticed most. She had a flatness to her that hadn't been there before. She'd always been animated, quick to laugh. Now she moved through my house like someone walking through water. I asked her if everything was okay. She said it was fine, just adjusting to married life. All the renovations. It was a lot. I let it go because I wanted to. I let it go because if something was wrong between Catherine and Marcus, that meant I was right to worry. And being right didn't help anything. This year, Catherine called me in October. "Mom, I want to host Christmas Eve this year," she said. "For everyone, you, me, Marcus. We're inviting some of his family too, friends. I want to make it big." I remember the phone pressed to my ear and this cold feeling spreading through my chest. "The house isn't ready," I said. It wasn't a lie. The renovations were ongoing. They'd gutted the kitchen last year, but the new one wasn't finished. The bathroom on the second floor was unusable. There were plastic sheets over doorways. "You can't host a party here." "Mom," Catherine said, and there was something in her voice, a firmness I didn't recognize. "We're almost done, and I need to do this. Please." I heard the please. I heard everything underneath it. She was asking for permission to reclaim something, to take back the house I'd given her but never really let her have. "We'll have it at my place," I said. "I'll do everything, just like always." There was a pause on the line, a long one. "Okay," Catherine said quietly. "Whatever you want, Mom. Whatever you want." I didn't hear the sadness in that phrasing. I only heard the compliance. I spent 6 weeks preparing. I cleaned every corner of the house. I organized my kitchen. I planned the menu, shopped carefully, tested recipes. I wanted it to be perfect. Perfect enough that Catherine would see everything she needed in one place. All the love, all the care, all the ways I'd been taking care of her for her entire life. I made my famous standing rib roast, the one she loved as a child, scalloped potatoes, roasted vegetables, homemade bread, a charcuterie board with cheeses I'd special ordered, and my apple pie, the one I've made since she was 5 from my mother's recipe. Catherine called 3 days before Christmas Eve to ask if she could bring a salad. "You don't need to bring anything," I said. "Mom, I want to contribute," she said. You don't need to contribute, I told her. Just come, be here. That's all I need. Okay, she said. See you Christmas Eve. December 24th came. I woke up early. Too early. 4 in the morning, my mind already spinning through everything I needed to do. I put on coffee. I set the table with the good china, the set my mother left me. I arranged the centerpiece, white roses, candles, holly, everything coordinated, everything controlled. By 6 in the evening, the house smelled like my life had smelled for decades, like love and work and the space between them. Catherine arrived first. She looked beautiful, a deep green dress, her hair down. I hadn't seen her wear her hair down in months. She brought a salad in a ceramic bowl, and when I saw it, I felt something twist in my stomach. She'd made an effort. It's beautiful, I said, taking the bowl. I made the dressing from scratch, Catherine said. The one you taught me with the... Yes, I remember, I said. Marcus arrived 20 minutes later with his parents and his brother. His mother was loud in that way. Wealthy people sometimes are. His father had a handshake that lasted too long. His brother spent the whole night checking his phone. There were 11 of us around my table. I watched Catherine move through my house in her green dress, and I realized I hadn't actually seen her in weeks. Not really seen her. We'd been together at dinners, but I'd been so focused on what she wasn't doing, how she wasn't helping enough, how she wasn't staying long enough, how she'd chosen Marcus over me, that I'd stopped looking at who she actually was. She was a woman. Not my daughter anymore, though she'd always be that too. A woman trying to be a good wife, a good guest, a good daughter, all at the same time. She was failing at it. Not because she couldn't do it, but because it's impossible to do all those things well simultaneously. Someone always gets the short end. Around 7:30, we sat down to eat. I brought out the roast. I heard the appreciative sounds. I watched people fill their plates. I'd made enough for seconds for everyone, thirds even. Catherine helped me serve. She moved around the table with a grace that surprised me. When had she learned to move like that? There was something almost performative about it, like she'd practiced being a hostess in a house that wasn't hers. Marcus sat at the head of the table. I'd set that place for myself, but when everyone arrived, Marcus had simply sat down there. I didn't have it in me to move him. When everyone had been served, I went to sit down. There was one place left, at the opposite end of the table, next to Marcus's mother, who'd spent the last hour telling me about her vacation home in Scottsdale. I reached for my plate. Catherine touched my arm. "Mom," she said softly, "you didn't contribute. Guests don't eat first." The table went quiet. I looked at my daughter. I looked at her face, which had a strange expression, like she was reading from a script she'd written but didn't quite believe in. "What?" I said. "You didn't help prepare," Catherine said. The words came faster now, like she'd been practicing them. "You did this all yourself. You wouldn't let me help, so by your own rules you shouldn't eat first." I stood there with my plate in my hand. Behind Catherine, I could see Marcus watching me. There was something in his expression that looked like satisfaction. That's when I understood. He'd put her up to this. Or not. Exactly. He'd suggested it, and Catherine, trying so hard to be a good wife, had agreed to it. This was some kind of test, some kind of power play disguised as principle. I set my plate down on the empty chair. "Of course," I said. My voice sounded strange to me. Calm. Too calm. "You're right. I apologize." Catherine's expression shifted. I saw confusion there. Fear, maybe. She'd expected me to fight, or cry, or do something a mother was supposed to do when she'd been humiliated in front of 12 people. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. I stood at the counter and looked out the window at my dark yard, and I felt something settle in me, something cold and clear. I'd spent 68 years believing that love was a currency, that if I gave enough of it, through my hands, through my work, through sacrifice, I'd earn the right to be treated with respect, to be valued, to matter. I was wrong. Love was just another thing people took from you. I sipped my wine and listened to the dinner party continue without me. I heard Catherine's forced laughter. I heard Marcus's mother talking about Arizona. I heard the clink of silverware, the scrape of chairs, all the sounds of people enjoying themselves at my table, eating my food, in my house. All the sounds of a life I'd built that belonged to everyone but me. After an hour, Catherine came to the kitchen. "Mom, come eat," she said. "It's getting late." I was loading the dishwasher. I'd been standing there systematically removing plates, scraping remnants of my meal prep into the trash. "I'm not hungry," I said. "Mom, Catherine, it's fine, really. I'm happy you're having a good time." She reached out to touch my shoulder, but I moved away. I kept my back to her and my hands busy. I'd learned that trick years ago, how to make yourself unreachable while still being in the same room. She stood there for another moment, and then she left. I don't know what she told the others. I don't know if they noticed my absence. I was in my own kitchen, in my own house, and I'd managed to make myself completely invisible. Around 11 p.m., people started leaving. I stayed in my room. I heard the door open and close. I heard Marcus say, "Merry Christmas," in that too loud voice he used around me. I heard Catherine's voice, thin and tired, saying goodbye to people. Finally, it was quiet. I came downstairs. Catherine was clearing the last of the plates from the table. The candles had burned down to almost nothing. The roses drooped in the centerpiece. Everything looked tired, like it had aged 10 years in one evening. "Thank you for coming," I said. Catherine looked up. "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "It was a lovely party," I interrupted. "Thank you for including me." "Mom, please, can we talk about what happened?" I picked up a dish towel, folded it, set it on the counter. "I'm very tired," I said. "It was a long day." I could see her trying to find words, trying to bridge the gap she'd created, but the gap was too wide now. I'd made sure of that. "Get home safely," I said. "Marcus is waiting." She left without another word. I stood in my kitchen after she was gone, and I felt the weight of what I'd been carrying for so long, the sacrifices, the choices, the ways I'd molded my life around a person who would eventually decide I didn't matter as much as I thought. That's when I made my decision. I'd bought this house. I'd paid for it with my money, my life, my years. I'd been a backup plan, an insurance policy. But I wasn't going to be a guest in it anymore. Not in any of it. The morning of Christmas Day, I called my lawyer. His name was Robert Hastings, and I'd worked in his office for 40 years. He was semi-retired now, but we still had lunch occasionally. He'd handled my will, my estate planning, everything. When I called him at home, he answered on the second ring. I could hear surprise in his voice. Catherine wasn't sick, was she? My tone had alarmed him. "No," I said. "Catherine is fine. I need to talk about the house." There was a pause. Robert was a smart man, smart enough to understand what that question meant. "Can you come in tomorrow?" he asked. "It's the day after Christmas, but I'll make time." "Today," I said. "Can you meet me today?" He heard something in my voice, something final. "Yes," he said. 2:00, my office. I hung up and sat with my coffee. The house was quiet around me. The roses on the table had dropped petals onto the white tablecloth. I cleaned them up and threw them away. Robert's office was in a tall building downtown, the one with the marble lobby and the views of the city skyline. I'd worked in that building for 4 decades. I knew every hallway, every bathroom, every quiet corner. When I stepped out of the elevator on the 16th floor, I felt like I was walking through a museum of my own life. Robert was waiting for me in his office. He was in his 70s now, softer around the middle than he used to be, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "Margaret," he said, standing to embrace me. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas," I said. I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk, the same chair I'd sat in countless times over decades, discussing everything from wills to property disputes. "Tell me what's happening," Robert said. I told him about Catherine, about the house, about the terms of the ownership, about Christmas Eve, the dinner, the humiliation of being told I wasn't entitled to eat at my own table because I hadn't contributed. Robert listened without interrupting. When I was finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I want to sell the house," I said. "I want to buy her out, or reverse it. I want her off the deed." "Margaret," Robert said gently, "you added her to the deed with the intention of providing her security. Your intention was—" "I know what my intention was," I said. "My intention was to make sure she was never abandoned, that she'd always have a home, but she's using that home as a leverage. She's using it to control me, to make me feel like I owe her something for the privilege of existing in a space I own." Robert nodded slowly. He picked up his pen and made a note. "We can remove her from the deed," he said. "However, she would have legal recourse. She'd have a claim on the house for all the money she's contributed, mortgage payments, taxes, upkeep. She could argue for compensation. We could end up in litigation." "How much money has she put into the house?" I asked. "I'd need to look at the numbers, but not enough to change the fundamental reality. You purchased the property. You put down a significant down payment. You've been the primary financial contributor." "So she can't actually claim half?" "No," Robert said, "but she could claim some amount, and it would be a process. It would take time. It would be messy." I thought about that. I thought about Catherine on Christmas Eve, her hands moving through my kitchen, her eyes avoiding mine. I thought about the calculation it must have taken to humiliate your own mother and call it principle. "Do it," I said. "Start the process." "Margaret?" "I've been thinking about her future for 40 years, I said. "It's time to think about mine." Robert set down his pen. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me with the kind of sadness you see in people who understand that they're watching something break that was never meant to break. "Let me talk to her," Robert said. "Before we make any formal moves, let me explain the legal reality of this. Maybe if she understands what she's risking—" "No," I said. "No more conversations. She had a chance to have a conversation on Christmas Eve. She chose to perform for her husband instead." "Give me 48 hours," Robert said. "That's all I'm asking. If she's unwilling to make this right, we'll move forward. but give me 2 days." I thought about refusing, but Robert had been kind to me for a long time, and he was right. There was nothing to be lost by giving it a bit more time. 48 hours, I said. I left his office and drove home. The streets were empty in that way they get after Christmas, when the holidays have passed, but normal life hasn't quite resumed. I drove past the school where Catherine went to elementary school, past the coffee shop where I taught her to make orders without being afraid, past the park where I pushed her on swings until my arms ached. All those moments, all that love. Did it matter now? I went home and I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I sat in my living room and I cried. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was the kind of crying old women do. Quiet, contained, the kind that doesn't leave traces. I cried because I'd failed at something I thought I couldn't fail at. I'd failed at being a mother in the way I'd imagined it. I'd failed at love. But I also cried because I was angry, and the anger felt clean. The anger felt like the first honest thing I'd felt in a long time. By evening, my phone rang. It was Marcus. "Margaret," he said. His voice was different on the phone, less performative, more businesslike. "We need to talk about what happened." "I don't think we do," I said. "Catherine is upset. You've been avoiding her." Catherine told me I didn't contribute. She told me I couldn't eat at my own table. Now she's upset that I'm not pretending that was acceptable. "That was a stupid thing to say," Marcus said. I could hear the calculation in his voice. He was pivoting. "Catherine feels terrible about it. She's been crying all day." "Then she should think more carefully about her words," I said. "Look, Margaret, I think you're blowing this out of proportion." "The house is in my name," I said. "The deed will be changed back to my name only by the end of the week. You'll receive notice from my lawyer. If Catherine wants to continue living there, she can rent it from me at market rate. If not, you'll need to find somewhere else." There was silence. "You wouldn't do that," Marcus said. "Watch me," I said. I hung up before he could respond. 48 hours. Robert had asked for 48 hours. That meant Catherine had 48 hours to make this right. To call me and apologize, to understand what she'd done and why it mattered. She didn't call. Instead, she showed up at my door the next morning. She was alone. No Marcus, no apologies prepared. Just Catherine in a gray coat with her hair pulled back, looking like she hadn't slept. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hello, Catherine." "Can I come in?" I stepped aside and let her enter. We sat in the living room, the spot where she'd played as a child, where we'd watch movies together, where I'd held her when her father died and when David left. "I talked to Robert," Catherine said. "He explained what you're doing." I didn't respond. "Mom, why didn't you just talk to me? Why did you go to a lawyer before you talked to me?" "I did talk to you," I said. "On Christmas Eve, you told me I didn't contribute. What else was there to say?" "That wasn't... I didn't mean..." Catherine stopped. She took a breath. "Marcus said that I should stand up for myself, that you were controlling, that I needed to show you that I wasn't your property." "And how did that work out?" I asked. "It didn't," Catherine said quietly. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was a horrible thing to say. I don't know what I was thinking." "You were thinking what Marcus told you to think," I said. "You were performing for him. You do that a lot." Catherine looked up at me. "That's not fair, isn't it? Tell me something, Catherine. When was the last time you made a decision without considering what Marcus would think? When was the last time you did something because you wanted to do it? Catherine didn't answer. She started to cry. I love him, she said. I know you do, I said. But I don't think he loves you. I think he loves the idea of having a wife. I think he loves the house and the business opportunities and the social status. But you, I don't think he loves you the way you deserve to be loved. You don't even know him, Catherine said. I know enough, I said. I know that when I told him I was removing you from the deed, he called me to manage the situation. He didn't ask about you. He didn't ask if you were okay. He wanted to know how to control the outcome. Catherine stood up. She walked to the window and looked out at the yard. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to think about what you're doing, I said. I want you to consider whether this is the life you actually want, and I want you to understand that your actions have consequences. What kind of consequences? Catherine asked. You're being removed from the house deed, I said. If you want to continue living there, you'll rent it from me at fair market rate. Mom, that's fair? I said. Yes, it's fair. You wanted to separate business from love. Consider this the business arrangement. Catherine turned from the window. Her face was red from crying. I don't recognize you right now, she said. Good, I said, because the woman you knew was disappearing anyway. Every time you chose Marcus over me, every time you performed instead of being honest, the woman you knew was already gone. So this is revenge, Catherine said. No, I said. This is clarity. This is me finally understanding that I can't buy my way into your love, that no amount of sacrifice will make me safe. So I'm stopping. I'm stopping the trying. I'm stopping the performance. I'm being honest. Honest, Catherine said bitterly. You're being cruel. Maybe I am, I said, but at least I'm being myself. Catherine went to the door. She put on her coat. I'll give you 48 hours, I said, to talk to Marcus, to think about what you want. If you want to stay in the house, we'll draw up a rental agreement. Fair terms. First month, last month security deposit, the way it works for anyone else. And if I don't? Catherine asked. Then you find somewhere else to live, I said. She left without another word. 2 days passed. Robert didn't hear from Catherine. I didn't hear from Catherine. On the 3rd day, I had him draw up the deed change and the rental agreement. I had them prepared with reasonable terms. I even offered her a small discount on rent, a final gesture toward the daughter I'd been trying to keep. Catherine signed the rental agreement, but she didn't stay in the house. A week later, I got a message that she and Marcus had decided to rent a place downtown, a modern apartment with a view. She said it was time for them to build something together on their own terms. I didn't respond to that message. What I did was something else. I went through the house, room by room, and I reclaimed it. I moved things around. I hung new art. I changed the color of Catherine's childhood bedroom. I made the space mine in a way I'd never allowed myself to do when she was living there. And then I did something that surprised me. I listed the house for sale. I called Robert and told him I wanted it on the market by spring. He asked if I was sure, and I said I was. I'd spent so many years making this place into what other people needed. It was time to build something new. Something just for me. 6 months later, the house sold. It went to a young family, 2 parents, 3 kids. When I did the walkthrough at closing, The mother was pregnant with their fourth. She talked about how many memories they were going to make there, how it was the perfect family home. I signed the papers and I didn't feel anything. That surprised me. I thought I'd feel sad, but what I felt was light, unmoored, free. I took the money and I did what I'd been dreaming about. I bought a small house by the water, a cottage, really. 2 bedrooms, a porch that faces the ocean, a kitchen with big windows. There's a lighthouse visible from my front steps. Every morning I wake up and I see it. I didn't invite Catherine to the opening. I didn't tell her about it until after I'd already settled in. And when she asked if she could visit, I told her yes, but that if she came, she was a guest. That my home was mine, and that she was welcome in it if she could understand that difference. She hasn't come yet. Marcus left Catherine last year. There was another woman, the predictable kind of story. When Catherine told me, I listened without saying, I told you so. But I was thinking it. I was thinking about how she'd humiliated me to impress a man who was going to leave her anyway. She's living in an apartment downtown now. She's in therapy, she tells me. She's trying to understand why she made the choices she did, why she let someone else's opinions override her own instincts, why she performed for Marcus when she could have just been herself. I don't know if she'll ever understand it completely. Understanding our own damage takes a long time. Sometimes it takes longer than we have. We talk occasionally, careful conversations. She's trying. I'm trying. But the ease between us is gone. It was fractured on Christmas Eve, and I don't think it will ever fully heal. Last month, Catherine called me. I've been thinking about that Christmas Eve, she said, about what I said. Yes, I said. I wasn't thinking clearly, she said. Marcus had put ideas in my head about independence, about not being dependent on you. But that's not what I was actually saying, is it? No, I said. You were saying that I didn't matter, that my contributions didn't count, that I was a guest in my own life. I was saying that I wanted to matter, Catherine said. I was saying that I wanted you to see me as someone other than your daughter, as someone who was building a life of my own. You could have just said that, I said. I know, Catherine said. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm truly sorry. I didn't say anything. I let the silence sit between us, the kind of silence that means something. That means work still needs to be done. I sold the house, Catherine said, the one we were living in. Marcus wanted to rent it out to keep it as an investment, but I realized that I was still doing it, still making decisions based on what he wanted instead of what I needed. So I sold it. I took my half of the equity and I used it to pay you back. I stopped. Pay me back for what? For the down payment you gave me on the Victorian, she said. It wasn't a gift, Mom. Not really. It was a loan. You just never said it out loud, but I felt it every time we were together. I felt the debt. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I never expected to be repaid. But she was right. I had kept score. Unconsciously, maybe, but I'd kept score nonetheless. I don't need the money, I said. I know you don't, Catherine said, but I needed to send it. I needed to do something that was mine. That wasn't about pleasing you or performing for Marcus. I needed to take responsibility for my own life. Where is the money? I asked. In an account at the bank, she said. In your name. I'll send you the details. After she hung up, I sat on my porch overlooking the ocean, and I cried again. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't anger or grief. It was something softer, something like forgiveness. Not forgiveness of her that had already happened, but forgiveness of myself. For believing that love could be a transaction, for thinking that sacrifice bought security. The money sat in that account for 3 months. I didn't know what to do with it. It felt contaminated somehow, weighted with the cost of our relationship. But eventually, I understood what I needed to do. I opened a scholarship fund in my mother's name for women returning to school after leaving abusive situations, for women who needed to start over, for women who were trying to reclaim themselves. I seeded it with Catherine's money and with some of my own. And I told Catherine what I'd done, not to make her feel guilty, not to make myself feel better, but because I wanted her to understand that something good could come from our pain, that sometimes the most healing thing we can do is transform our hurt into something that helps other people. She cried when I told her. "Thank you," she said. "That's beautiful, Mom." "Don't thank me," I said. "Just remember it. When you're tempted to perform again, when you're tempted to make yourself small for someone else, remember that there's another way to live." It's been 2 years now since Christmas Eve. Catherine is dating someone new. She met him in her therapy group. He's a teacher, quiet. He listens more than he talks. I've met him twice, and both times he's asked questions about me. Genuine questions, not the polite kind. He seems to actually want to know who I am. I like him. But more importantly, I can see that Catherine likes herself when she's with him. She doesn't perform. She's just present. Last month, I got a letter in the mail. It was an invitation to Catherine and her boyfriend's engagement party at a restaurant downtown. Nothing at my house, nothing staged, just an invitation to be a guest in her happiness. I RSVP'd yes. The night of the party, I wore a blue dress. The kind of dress I would have worn if I wasn't trying to be someone's mother or someone's wife or someone's idea of what a woman should be. Just a dress, because I liked it. Catherine saw me from across the room, and she came straight to me. She hugged me, and I let myself hold her just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to have someone you love hold you back. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Hi, Catherine," I said. Her boyfriend was standing nearby. She introduced us properly, not as my mother, but as Margaret, my mom, as if I was a person in my own right, as if I had a name that existed independent of my relationship to her. We had dinner together that night. Catherine and her boyfriend and me. We talked about her work, a big promotion she got, a project she was proud of. We talked about his teaching. We talked about the wedding they were planning. Nothing about the past. Nothing about what we'd lost or how we'd hurt each other. Just 3 people sharing a meal and being honest about who we were. Later, when we were leaving, Catherine walked me to my car. "I'm glad you came," she said. "So am I said. "I know I can't undo Christmas Eve," she said. "I know I can't go back and make different choices." "No," I said. "You can't. But you can make different choices now, and you are. That's what matters." "I love you, Mom," she said. "I know," I said. "I love you too." I drove home to my cottage by the water, and I thought about love, about how I'd spent my life understanding it as something you give and never get back, something that's supposed to make you smaller, to make you sacrifice everything. But maybe that's not what love is. Maybe love is just looking at another person and seeing them clearly, accepting that they're going to make choices you don't understand. accepting that sometimes they're going to hurt you, and choosing to show up anyway, not because you have to, not because you're performing, but because you want to. I'm 68 years old and I'm still learning what that means. Some days I feel good about what I did on Christmas Eve. I feel strong and clear and honest. I feel like I finally stopped abandoning myself for someone else's comfort. I feel like I took my life back. Other days, I'm sad. I'm sad that Catherine and I lost those years where our relationship was easy. I'm sad that it took such a dramatic confrontation to make us both honest. I'm sad that love had to be weaponized before we could understand what it actually was, but mostly, I'm okay. I'm okay because I finally understand something that took me 68 years to learn. You cannot love anyone into loving you back. You cannot sacrifice yourself into safety. You cannot perform your way into belonging. What you can do is this. You can show up as yourself. You can set boundaries. You can walk away from situations that diminish you. And you can trust that if someone loves you, they'll meet you there. In the mess, in the honesty, in the imperfection. And if they don't, then you go home to your cottage by the water. You watch the lighthouse turn. You make yourself dinner. And you remember that you are enough. That you have always been enough. That you never needed anyone to tell you that. I think about that dinner table on Christmas Eve sometimes. About the moment when Catherine told me I didn't contribute. About the cold clarity that came after. About the decision I made to stop performing. To stop trying. To stop abandoning myself in service of other people's comfort. I don't regret it, but I also don't recommend it as a path. I wouldn't wish this particular education on anyone. There are gentler ways to learn about boundaries, quieter ways to discover who you are. But sometimes life doesn't give you gentle. Sometimes life gives you Christmas Eve in a house full of people who don't see you, and sometimes the only way to make them see you is to stop pretending you don't exist. My name is Margaret, and I'm 68 years old. I've spent the last 2 years learning how to live alone without being lonely, learning how to eat dinner without an audience, learning how to love people without keeping score. I've spent the last 2 years learning who I am when no one's watching, and it turns out I'm worth knowing. What would you do if this happened to you? Tell me in the comments. I always read them. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories like mine. I'm Margaret, and I believe everyone deserves to be seen. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as a supporting character in someone else's story, but as a whole person, as someone who matters. If you're watching this and you're feeling invisible, I want you to know that's not your fault, but taking your power back, that's your responsibility. Thank you for listening to my story.